Welcome, everyone. I know a lot of you are here from Amanda's podcast, so you may not know me. My name is Anna, and I manage adult programs for the Lake Bluff Library. We're located in a small suburb about an hour north of Chicago. So tonight we are recording, and it'll take us a day or two to edit that, but then we'll have it up on our YouTube, and I'm going to send the link to everyone who registered tonight and to Amanda to share with anyone who's looking for the event that couldn't make it. Amanda's asked that if you have questions, you can go ahead and post them in the chat throughout, and she'll take moments to pause and answer those. Otherwise, we will at the end have a small Q&A session where you can unmute your microphones and ask a question aloud. If you prefer to do that, then use the chat. I'm going to explain a little about why we have Amanda here tonight. We are partnering with our neighbor, Lake Forest Library, to do a series we call Read Between the Ravines. We do it once a year, focusing on a nonfiction book. This year's is Unraveled, The Life and Death of a Garment by Maxine Beda. And Maxine Beda is going to be speaking at the Gordon Community Center on April 4th. My coworker is going to post a couple links for you in the chat where you can access more of the events in this series. Not all of them are Zoom enabled. Some of them are in person only. But we hope that if you're interested, you at least jump onto those Zoom events. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now, and we will let Amanda get started.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to all of you. My name is Amanda. Some of you know me already, and some of you don't. Hello to all of you who don't know me already. You're probably wondering, like, who am I and why am I here talking to you tonight? And how do I know what I'm talking about? Well, I've worked in the buying department of several iconic millennial fast fashion brands, from Urban Outfitters, ModCloth, Nasty Gal, so many other ones, big and small. Currently, in addition to making Clotheshorse, I'm the head of product for a family-owned chain of gift shops who actually found me via my work on Clotheshorse. They brought me in to help them rebrand and become more sustainable and meaningful. So right now I'm kind of in the midst of a major retail experiment to see, can we really on a larger scale allow customers to shop their values and do better for the world. So stay tuned for how that goes. In my personal life, I love animals, crafting, thrifting, traveling. I have a Hello Kitty tattoo. I've met Hello Kitty many times, not to brag. And my superpower is speed reading. So I was really excited when the library reached out to me about presenting to you tonight. So before we talk, there's a lot to talk about here, right? You're probably like, what is sustainable fashion? Hold your horses. We're going to talk about that in a moment. First off, I just wanted to give you some of the facts about clothing. And those of you who already listen to Clotheshorse or follow me on Instagram, you've heard these facts so many times. Every year, the fashion industry produces 150 billion garments. About 30% of those, that's 45 billion garments, are never sold, meaning no person ever wears them. They're destroyed, they're burned, sometimes they're donated, but honestly, they don't need to be donated because this world is swimming in clothing. Why? Up here in the global north, Americans buy about 70 new articles of clothing each year. Let's say that again, 70. I want to say that's a new garment every 5.5 days. And so, once a week, buying something new, occasionally buying two. Every time I post this fact on social media, tons of people come forward to say, how could that ever happen? I've never bought that many clothes in 5 years. And I will say, if you didn't buy any new clothes last year, and so that means someone else bought 140 to make up for you. 70 is the average. Sounds unfathomable, but think we live in a world of haul videos, right? Where people are ordering 10, 20 things from Shein. That adds up really fast. Or hitting the outlets and coming home with bags and bags loaded up in their cars, or ordering lots of sizes because they don't know what size they are. There are so many ways in which one can easily exceed 70 new garments in 1 year. We live in a world that encourages us to shop for new clothing as often as possible. The sad thing, there are many sad things here, but 60% of new clothing, that's 70 new garments that Americans are buying each year, end up in the landfill or incinerator within the same year it was made. That's 60 billion garments each year being made and instantly, or very close to instantly, becoming trash. We toss 85% of the clothing we no longer want in the trash, 85% of those 70 new articles of clothing. We donate the remaining 15% to charities, your Goodwill bin or other places like that. If we use that 70 new garments each year as like the model here, as the basis for extrapolating, so doing some math here, that means 60 of those garments will end up in the landfill. 10 will be donated. And you think, okay, well, at least 10 are going to the thrift store. But actually, of those 10 items, only one will be purchased locally and worn again, whether it's bought by someone who's buying it for themselves or someone who's buying it as a reseller to sell on Poshmark or Depop or anywhere else. The rest of that clothing will head to the landfills like its other friends, or it will be shipped overseas in the massive global secondhand clothing industry, most likely to the global south. A lot of clothes. I threw a lot of numbers at you. I am going to just say there's a lot of information in this deck. The good news is we're going to send you a link to access this when all of this is over, so you can refer to it again and again, and there are sources at the end for further reading and just verifying these facts that I'm sharing. So something I hear a lot, I've heard my whole life as a person who works in fashion, who has, my family, I'm getting honest, thinks that I go shopping for a living. Like I'm just out there. There's like a shopping montage every day and all this music and I'm having a blast and trying on clothes. That's not how it works at all. It's a lot of spreadsheets. I have a really fancy calculator. Fashion matters. I mean, think about all of those garments that are being made every year, the resources, the time, the movement around the world. Of course, fashion matters. It has a massive impact on both planet and the people. The fashion industry itself is responsible for 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Textile production alone, we're not even talking about the sewing or transport of these clothing. Just creating the textiles releases 1.2 billion tons, that's metric tons, of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere every year. In fact, the industry produces 20% of global wastewater, and it uses more energy than both aviation, meaning literally airplanes, and shipping, huge ships, combined. This doesn't surprise me at all because so many of these garments are moving around the world via airplane or boats, but we also have to make them. So there's just so much energy and resources involved in creating these clothes. And remember, 45 billion of them are never even going to be worn by one person. Others are going to be worn once or twice and tossed aside. And when you start to think about that, well, it will keep you up at night. Don't let that happen. But realize that fashion matters, that clothing matters. If that's not enough for you, the global apparel accessory industry employs more than 75 million workers worldwide. In fact, there are many experts who think that number may be understated because so many people are informally involved in the fashion industry, whether they're working in cotton fields or they're just like salvaging extra materials, working in the docks, people we're not thinking of who very much are involved in the production and transport of clothing. Who makes our clothing is really important. I never cease to be amazed. At least once a week, someone reaches out to me and says, "Don't robots make our clothes?" And to be honest, I think maybe I, for a while, thought robots made clothes because, like, they make cars. Why wouldn't they make clothes? Turns out they don't, because robots are not good at sewing yet. It really requires that skillful touch of a human. And on top of that, the industry doesn't want to spend money on robots when they get so much work for so little money. Once again, the global fashion industry employs more than 75 million people worldwide. These people do not work in unions. They don't have set schedules. They don't have the protection of labor laws. Most of them do not make a living wage. A living wage, if you were wondering, is not the same as minimum wage. In fact, minimum wage is not a living wage. You know, it's not just sustaining your life that you want. You want access to education, an ability to save money, healthcare, a nice place to live, good food, all of that. That's part of a living wage. Most garment workers, and when I say garment workers, I don't just mean people who are sewing our clothes. I mean the people who are making the fabrics and the buttons and the zippers, and packing everything up for shipping, cutting the fabric, doing inspections, steaming, running dye baths. Making clothes is so complicated. There are so many people and steps and facilities and machines, but not robots, involved. And all of these people, for the most part, are underpaid. And guess what else? 85% of these people are women. We all know about the gender wage gap. It's even bigger in the fashion industry, with women making about 60 to 75% of men's wages. Workers are expected to work 10 to 16 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. Overtime is mandatory, and it's not guaranteed that you'll be paid for all the hours you've worked. That's called wage theft, and it's really rampant in the garment industry. Factory conditions are dangerous, unsanitary. The bathrooms are terrible if they exist at all. Sexual harassment and abuse, physical and mental abuse on the job are very common in these factories and other production facilities. What makes it even worse is, we talk about all of the progress we've made here in the United States with Me Too. That hasn't happened in the garment industry. And often women who report any sort of abuse or harassment, they face, one, losing their jobs, and two, it sullies their reputation and they may have a difficult time getting married in the future. So there are many reasons why they're not going to speak up about that. If you're not already like, wow, this is a really grim picture. Well, also, forced labor is very common in the fashion industry, from the Uyghur Muslims in China to these so-called dowry contracts in India, where young women are promised enough money to get married and have a dowry in exchange for 2 or 3 or 4 years of nonstop labor. Basically, it's indentured servitude. So these clothes, they're made really, really cheaply, and we're going to get into that. The speed, the cheapness, the exploitation, the excess, these are all important issues that we're going to unpack tonight. It's not just fashion. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It's so big. It's such a big industry that employs so many people, uses so many resources, and has such an impact on the planet that we have to talk about it. That doesn't mean we can't enjoy getting dressed up and enjoy our own personal style, but we also have to be aware of its impact on the planet. So before we move on, I just threw so many facts at you. Does anybody have any questions?
We don't have any in the chat at this time, so I think we'll move on.
Great. Okay. Before we go too deep, I know we're here to talk about sustainable fashion. You're saying, Amanda, why did you make me wait 15 minutes into the conversation to get to this? I don't know why either. What is the meaning of sustainable? This is a word that gets thrown out everywhere in advertising, in buzzy blog posts, in magazines. Influencers are using it. There are influencers where sustainable is a part of their username. What does sustainable mean? Well, sustainability refers to the ability of something to maintain or sustain itself over time. That means not overusing resources, not damaging existing resources, not having a negative impact on biomes and other aspects of life on our planet. And it also means keeping our consumption within the sphere of what we can actually make responsibly. That's a lot to talk about, right? And there are many other theories about sustainability and how they work, but it's really just leaving the world as good as it was when we inherited it, or better when we leave, and tailoring all our consumption within that, if that makes sense. The sustainability community, and that includes me, when I speak about something being sustainable or not, I'm referring to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. You can see a little screenshot of them here to the right of the screen. And these goals are used to see how sustainable something is. There's 17 goals that the UN has been working on since the 1990s, and they hope to achieve by 2030. TikTok, it's 2022. I don't see a lot of progress in some of these, to be really honest. Um, what's interesting about the UN Sustainable Development Goals is that, yes, about half of them relate to planet and resources like water and air and carbon footprint and forests, et cetera. But the other half are about people, ending poverty and hunger, protecting human rights, access to education, healthcare, good nutrition, all of these things. When I see sustainable being used by brands in advertising, in conversation, I often see referring to an item's impact on the planet, but never a conversation about the people who made that. And so I'm just going to drop a name here. When H&M comes out with a conscious collection that's made of all of these sustainable fabrics, spoiler, they're not really that sustainable, I get annoyed because I'm like, great, so you maybe used some recycled fibers, maybe didn't, maybe you reduced the carbon emissions or the wastewater when you made this, but what about the people who made that? Did they get paid a living wage? What conditions are they working under? Do they have access to good food, education, nice housing, all of that? That never comes up. And so I often have a problem with most sustainable brands or claims of sustainability that are out there in the fashion world right now. Just to get down to brass tacks, this is a slide with one sentence. It's not sustainable if it isn't good for both the planet and its people. It has to be both. If it was just great for people, but we were like pouring buckets of oil into the ocean to make it, that would be bad too. But unfortunately, most retailers are going the other direction where they're really focusing on the materials and not who made the materials or who sewed the garment or who sold the garment to you in the stores. So now that we know what sustainable is, what is sustainable fashion? I actually like to use the term slow fashion instead. They're synonymous because sustainable has been so sullied by the H&Ms of the world. I prefer slow fashion as a term. So slow fashion / sustainable fashion is a thoughtful is the important word here, thoughtful approach to style and clothing that considers both the processes and the resources required to produce clothing. And processes and resources mean the planet, mean water, mean materials. It also means people. The slow fashion community values the fair treatment of people, animals, and the planet. We know that a better future requires change and work from all of us. And slow fashion, sustainable fashion has a few habits that are an important part of it, reducing our consumption. And that means buying less brand new stuff, making the things that we have last a lot longer, building long-lasting relationships with our clothes. We're going to talk about fast fashion in a minute. And fast fashion is, yes, it's the opposite of slow fashion, but it's almost even more like, I don't know what's more extreme than the opposite, the arch nemesis of slow fashion, because fast fashion is really about the newest, shopping as often as possible for as much as possible and never building a long relationship with anything because it will go in and out of trend. Slow fashion says, no, we focus on things that matter to us, that are timeless to us, that we'll wear all the time. As part of that, we're proud outfit repeaters. We challenge the notion that every occasion requires a new outfit. Sounds wild to say that out loud, but you know, we've all been swimming in a sea of Instagram outfit of the day posts for a long time. And it's been very normalized that every birthday, every wedding, every party, every job interview needs a special new outfit for it. Don't even get me started on the whole suitcase of brand new clothes for a vacation. I myself have been guilty of that as well. That's how you get to 70 garments in a year or more, right? So we're all about saying, hey, I'm going to have this signature look that I wear for special occasions. And people will see me and say, oh, there's Amanda and she's in her strawberry dress. Of course she is. That's her best dress, her favorite dress. And this is a special occasion. The fact that she's wearing it again shows how special this occasion is to her as well. We spend our money strategically. I always tell people that your money is as powerful as your vote. I think We can feel powerless in the face of the Amazons of the world. And I don't mean extremely tall people, I mean the company. We can feel as if, how could we ever have impact? I'm going to tell you, as a person who's worked on the other side of the equation for my entire adult life, meaning I have been there trying to come up with stuff to get you to spend your money. You, the consumer, we are obsessed with making sure that you come back and spend your money again and that we don't lose you. So if you aren't shopping from us anymore, we're going to figure out why and do better, or lose you as a customer and many other people as a customer and lose our company, right? So we're constantly, everyone on that side is looking at reports every day trying to figure out, how do we keep this business rolling? What is our customer telling us they want? So when we spend our money in places that do things the right way, that reflect our values, we are helping them grow. We're also withholding money from people who are doing things the bad way and kind of forcing their hand to change. The last thing, and this is a really important part of sustainable fashion, it's mindful rehoming of unwanted clothing. We don't just jam it in a donation bin or toss it in the trash. We find other ways to pass our clothing on to someone else. We'll get to that later in this presentation. All right, we talked about sustainable fashion. You can't talk about that without talking about its arch nemesis, fast fashion. I think you're going to be surprised by what fast fashion is, though, because I bet I say that and maybe you're picturing Fashion Nova or Forever 21 or H&M or Zara. But what if I told you it's a lot bigger than that? So let's start with what fast fashion is not. It's not a specific price point. I think we all are under the illusion that fast fashion is inexpensive and that's how you spot it. Not true. It comes in all price points. We might think it's a certain aesthetic, like it has to be really sexy or really young or really skimpy. That's why it's less expensive, I guess. I don't know. I'm here to tell you fast fashion comes in many forms, many aesthetics. Sometimes it's hard to spot. Furthermore, fast fashion is not a particular customer base. It's not people who are poor. It's not people who are young. It's not people who have a specific personal style. Fast fashion caters to people of all ages, sizes, and socioeconomic backgrounds. It is all around us. You can't identify fast fashion by the location of stores, whether it's in a mall or not. You can't identify it by the merchandising, which is like the experience within the store. Let me tell you, here's a fast fashion brand, Anthropologie, stunning store decor. It's fast fashion. You can't identify fast fashion by the influencers that are out there hawking it on the internet, or any celebrities who are adjacent to it, collabs they do, even some of the like branded merchandise in the store. You can't spot it that way at all. You're like, okay, great. So now I'm living in mystery. Like, how do I spot fast fashion? We're gonna get to that. Here's what fast fashion is. It's a business model that relies on selling as much stuff as possible, as often as possible. It's a way of doing business that encourages its customers to buy as much stuff as possible, as often as possible. That's how the business keeps rolling. And that can involve a lot of misleading, manipulative marketing, like greenwashing. We're going to get into that too. And it's an industry that will always prioritize profits over people, whether that's the people making the clothing, the people working in the stores or the offices, the people dealing with the burden of our unwanted clothing, or even in many ways, the customer. So something that has happened in our lifetimes, in my career, I actually watched this happen. I didn't know it at the time, but I looked back and it was crystal clear, was the fast fashionification of an entire industry. It kind of snuck up on us. Yes, in the early aughts, the 2000s, there were fast fashion brands, like the old original ones, Forever 21, H&M, Zara was starting to come up. But it wasn't this massive, widespread business model. In fact, most retailers looked at those fast fashion brands and were like, ew, like we don't ever want to be like them. But then something happened, and it was the 2008 financial crisis and the ensuing recession. Everything was sold on sale, whether you were Nordstrom or the Gap, everything was sold on sale. What happened in that year or two is that customers, myself included, became addicted to bargains. And Coincidentally, retailers were addicted to the increasing revenue that accompanied all those deals. We would think we were getting a hot deal, and instead of buying one or two things, we'd buy four or six. It was great for the industry. But these retailers who weren't Forever 21 or H&M, they were sort of in a pickle, which was this. They saw how those brands were experiencing this exponential growth, and customers were becoming more and more addicted to deals. They wanted to go shopping, spend $100 and leave with like a whole sack of clothing. That wasn't happening for a lot of these retailers at that time. So they thought, okay, like to compete in this world of fast fashion, we can either reduce our prices, right, and compete right alongside of them. If we do that, it's going to be really brand damaging. Like we're not going to have the same cachet that we had before. We're going to seem less aspirational. Or we can just ignore it, keep our prices in the same place they've always been, possibly totally risk our entire business as customers buy more inexpensive stuff. So suddenly someone somewhere had a stroke of genius, which was, how about we keep the prices on our price tags the same, but we sell everything on sale, or we anticipate that we're going to sell most of it on sale. So you might pick up a dress, the price tag would say $88, but the buyers, the designers, everybody involved in creating that knew that really that dress was going to sell for $40 or less. So it had to be profitable selling at $40 or less. We're going to talk about the impacts of that, but let's just say the clothing got not as good. When everybody started selling everything on sale all the time, then everything was the same price and it was hard to be competitive again. Like nobody had anything special going for them for the most part. So then it became a competition to get all the latest trends as fast as possible. Every retailer had to be the first person to offer every single trend, no matter how short-lived it was. And that meant they had to operate a lot faster. They skipped fittings and sample reviews. They shipped everything via air, which takes about a week versus a ship, which would take 1 or 2 months. Everything just got super, super fast. That's why we kind of see like brands launching 100, 200 new styles every week. We see trends that pass so fast, like animal print. It was like here and then gone again, like 2 years ago. It was like, don't buy any animal print because you're going to regret it. Here's the big news. In 2022, most big retailers and brands operate using the fast fashion model. Madewell, Anthropologie, Urban Outfitters, Free People, a lot of stuff that you see at Nordstrom and Nordstrom Rack, TJ Maxx, Kohl's. I'm sure there's more brands I'm not thinking of right now. All of them operate under the fast fashion model. They're using the same fabrics, the same tactics, often even the same factories. Before we move on, does anybody have any questions?
Yes, so we had a question in the chat, I think referring to the first part. Does the 70 articles of clothing a person buys each year include shoes? Please say no, because I'm so guilty of this.
It does not include shoes. It also does not include single socks. It does not include underwear either. These are questions I get because someone was like, well, if you bought 35 pairs of socks, then you would be at 70. And I was like, no. And yeah, it doesn't include shoes either. I actually am afraid to see the shoe numbers. Something I talk about periodically on the podcast is how we've all been really encouraged to hoard shoes as a personality characteristic. We all know. All right, well, moving on.
We did have a comment which led to me to a question talking about, like you mentioned, brands like Nordstrom and Von Meer went from higher quality items to less quality in order to be able to sell those items at a lower price point. And this person said that they have now turned to making their own clothing, but are having trouble finding quality materials because the fabric stores have done the same thing. Yes, I agree with this. So do you have any recommendations for finding quality materials for making your own clothes?
Stay out of Joann and stay out of Michael's. Definitely, it's going to be more expensive, but I really urge you to try your local fabric shop or search online for smaller boutique fabric stores. I've been talking to a lot of different ones who are really doing what they can to get the best fabrics. I agree. The last 3 times I decided I was going to sit down and sew something, I went to Joann because it was pandemic and it was the only thing near me. And The fabrics were almost worse than what I was seeing at, say, Forever 21, but I promise you that there are good fabrics out there.
And we do have a couple of local, more independent fabric stores. I'll try to find their websites to post in the chat.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, that's always my suggestion there. I always say that Joanne and Michaels are fast craft. They're actually they have adopted a lot of the same tactics that fast fashion has. So nothing is as good, but it's really expensive, except that it's not, because it's a deal. And we're gonna do a checklist in a few that help you identify fast fashion. And when you say, okay, let's take the same checklist, but look at Joanne, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. So anyway.
And then let's see, we have a question which I think you're going to get to, which is an example of a company that is not fast fashion or a brand. I think you're going to have some examples coming up, right, of ones that aren't fast fashion.
Totally, and where you can find them. Yes, it's going to be later in the presentation. All right, everyone ready to move on?
Yeah, I'm going to say let's save the last question for the end, because I think that'll be quite a discussion.
Okay. Whoa. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's talk about all of these deals. We already touched on the spoiler here, which is that those deals are not so hot, right? Let's go back. Retailers are saying, okay, we're going to sell everything on sale, right? So even though it says $88, we're going to sell it for 40. Actually, maybe we'll sell a lot more of them for 30. This needs to be just as profitable as it used to be at $88 at $40 or $30. So that meant cutting costs, right? Lots of things happened there. I mean, I watched this go down in my career, and the quality of our clothing just, it happened so slowly and yet so fast. So less expensive fabrics were used. When you are trying to make a garment meet your margin target as a buyer, the first thing you say is, what can we do about the fabric? Inevitably, we're going to turn it into a cheaper polyester. I always think of, or I used to think of, the 70s as the golden era of polyester, all the leisure suits and the bell bottoms, right? We think of that as the time where polyester was its most popular. You would be wrong, because we're actually living in the golden era of polyester right now, with 60 to 70% of clothing made or sold right now made of polyester. And I think it's important to call out that polyester is plastic. When you wash it, it sheds microplastics into the water. When you're done wearing it, if it goes to landfill, it sits there for centuries. And polyester has become really sneaky. Sometimes it's a sheer chiffon, sometimes it's kind of a silky satin, sometimes it feels like a cozy acrylic sweater, also plastic. It comes into so many different formats, and it's blended into everything now. And polyester, I mean, from like a purely like buying perspective, has some positive attributes, right? It takes color really well. It can make a product more durable, although when it's blended with cotton, it often makes that garment more pilly, because the polyester, the tension of it is so much stronger than the cotton. So it breaks the fiber, and then it forms the little pill balls. So it's not perfect. But I can see why it has become so popular, because it can come in so many forms and be so confusing, and it's cheap. In addition to changing fabrics, we started subbing out trims. We shifted from metal zippers to plastic zippers. We used not as great of buttons, hooks, snaps. Sometimes we would say, hey, we can't afford this with 12 buttons. Can we get it down to 10 on a button-up shirt? So we would change up the spacing. Everyone who has breasts loves that, right? Like right about here, that missing button. We just saw a lot of stuff getting cheaper. Details like pockets and linings were removed. I know everyone all the time is like, why don't women's clothes have pockets? It's because they're shockingly expensive. Expensive being a relative term, but to get a pocket added into a dress is like a couple bucks. And often retailers don't want to add $2 more onto something they're going to sell to you for $40 in the first place. Linings, like I said, another really expensive thing, expensive being relative. And another thing that you don't think about that actually, as you shave it down, shaves down the cost, is the length of dresses, skirts, shorts, pants. Man, the fashion industry loves a short mini skirt moment, a crop top moment. a few years ago when it was very Kardashian to wear sheer dresses with just like some underwear underneath. Gold mine for the industry. Just like, great, we can make clothes even more cheaply and sell them for the same price, and people will like it. We cut corners in fit and technical design. Those fit sessions with the model, with the technician, they cost money. Let's get them out of here. We don't have time or money to produce more samples. Factories were squeezed for lower and lower pricing. And that meant that workers were paid less and less. And lastly, because everything had gotten so fast, everything needed to ship via air, meaning literally on an airplane. It costs $3 to $5 to airship a garment. It costs about 50 cents to ship it on a boat. So that cost had to be made up somewhere else too, which was like, okay, let's take another inch off the skirt. Let's remove one more button. Can we take out the lining at the top at least? That kind of stuff. Ultimately, we were all left with a lot of poorly fitting, low quality, short-lived clothing, which was great because then we wanted to go buy some more. Crazy fact, clothes are less expensive now than they were in the 1990s. The other day, just for fun, I was looking at a bunch of scans from Adelia's catalog from, I want to say, like 1994. And a lot of the sweaters were $58, $68, or $78. I went onto the Urban Outfitters website and all of them were cheaper for comparable sweaters. I mean, everything else is so much more expensive than it was in the 90s, but clothes are actually less expensive. Okay, so I told you I was going to help you spot fast fashion. I have this easy checklist. It's actually kind of easy. First off, ask yourself, does the store or website have hundreds or thousands of items for sale? Why? Why do they need so many items? Because remember, the goal of fast fashion is to get you to buy as much stuff as possible, as often as possible. And in order to do that, they have to offer you just this like a massive selection that you'll never see the end of, because that'll keep you coming back. Part of that is, does the brand launch new items every week or every day? Fast fashion retailers want you back shopping every week. They want you to look at Zara on your lunch break on Wednesday and place yet another order and get into that routine. They need to show you something new every week and send you emails about it and post on Instagram and TikTok, etc. Here, this is when we're talking about Joann or Michaels. It's a great one. Do things seem to go on sale pretty fast? And you might not be able to read this, but would you be embarrassed to buy something full price from this brand? If I go to a Michaels and I don't have a coupon, I am filled with such a deep sense of shame, like I'm getting scammed. That's a problem, right? Does the brand have a dazzling array of deals? One day I looked at the Shein website and like you get free shipping and 15% off. And there were all these collections that were an additional 30% off. And I was like, how much does anything actually cost on here? I'm really, really confused. Does the brand copy or steal designs from designers and artists? We see this happen a lot. The reason it happens is if you want to deliver 100 new styles or 1,000 new styles every week or month, you kind of run out of ideas, or you need to hire a whole army of designers, which will drive up the costs of making those clothes. And retailers can't do that. So they kind of steal from one another and smaller brands and designers as well. If you could check more than one thing on this list, you're definitely looking at some fast fashion. I would urge you to try this with a lot of your favorite brands. Spend some time on their website or go into the stores and see how they measure up here. So you probably are picking this up already, but fast fashion will never be sustainable. So just disregard their Instagram posts and conscious collections and everything else that state otherwise. Why can't fast fashion be sustainable? Well, it cannot exist without overconsumption and over shopping. That's the whole point of it, right? To sell us as much stuff as possible, as often as possible. Furthermore, the fast fashion model relies on speed. That's where the fast came from. And that means churning out low quality, easily disposable clothing as fast as possible, as often as possible. And these are just not sustainable behaviors. Furthermore, fast fashion can't operate without worker exploitation. They literally cannot offer these rock bottom prices and pay a living wage to their workers throughout the supply chains. And so they just can't get there. You know, fast fashion cannot be sustainable, which is why fast fashion loves greenwashing, AKA fake it until you never make it. You've probably seen greenwashing tossed out there on social media. It's been coming up a lot lately because we are reaching peak greenwashing right now. You're like, what is it? Well, basically, greenwashing is when a company or a brand claims to be environmentally conscious strictly for marketing purposes, but actually isn't making any notable sustainability efforts at all, or is doing something like, say, H&M does, where they talk up the sustainability of the fabric, but they don't talk about the people making it or any of the other energy consumption in the supply chain. Greenwashing is bigger than ever right now because, like I talked about, for more than a decade now, retailers have been trying to sell us the stuff as cheaply as possible. Then they all were there at the bottom. That wasn't a way to compete. Then it was like, okay, well, now we're going to do it as fast as possible. But then what everybody ended up with was the same off the shoulder leopard print blouse for like 3 years. I don't know how that happened with all the trends they were bringing through, but they all of a sudden kind of all had the same clothes. And if you were into what was the trend at that moment, then there was nothing out there for you to buy anyway. So they were sort of like had competed themselves into a corner. And then it was like, wait, people have a lot of eco anxiety right now. They're talking about climate change. They're talking about water. They're talking about the plastics crisis. There's a marketing story that we can latch onto. And you see it at all price points. I mean, even Shein is trying to do greenwashing and they sell clothes that are like $7. Like those aren't sustainable. We've got H&M out there really saying like, this is the future of our company. And every other brand in between has really jumped in to greenwashing. It's not a good faith effort towards a better world. Fortunately, I'm going to help you be a greenwashing detective because it turns out they all kind of use the same tricks and they're not as innovative as you might think they are with tricking us into buying things. One is you want to look out for words that just don't mean very much because they aren't measurable. Like green doesn't mean anything unless we're talking about a color. Eco-friendly, another thing like what? When I really dissect that, I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. Natural, another one that sounds very appealing but means nothing. Conscious, talking about H&M. Recycled, that's great, except what was it recycled from and can it be recycled again? Those questions aren't being answered. Fair wage, I see this one tossed out a lot. Fair wage is not the same as a living wage. There are tons of other greenwashing terms I've seen thrown out there, like family-owned factory. Some of us have some pretty terrible families. I personally would not want my family to own a factory. It would be a terrible place to work. Not a great selling point, right? There are tons of words that you've probably seen out there too, where you're like, what does that really mean? So from when I see these in a blog post or an ad campaign, I'm like, okay, we need to look deeper here. Next, beware of what I call fluffy washing, which is when brands exploit your love of animals to sell you dumb stuff. We've seen H&M do a collab with PETA. Shein did a Shein Cares thing that I think benefited zoos, but I'm not even really sure. Real talk is that any brand that truly cares about animals will also care about preserving the planet where those animals live. Fast fashion, happy animals, they don't intersect. They're far apart from one another. One example I like to throw out a lot is vegan leather, which is actually plastic. It's actually worse for the planet than actual leather, which is also bad for the planet. Vegan leather is somehow worse, but it's a great rebrand of pleather. That's what we used to call vegan leather, pleather. Next is don't let them, and this is one where I have been tricked many times, don't let them trick you with a ton of fancy sounding certifications and organizations. When you actually get down to doing some Googling, they don't amount to much. And you're like, oh, wait, okay. If you see a certification or organization being touted by a retailer, just Google the name of that with greenwashing behind it, and you will find your answer pretty fast. Next, I love this term. It's been coined by Greenpeace. It's called ad bluster, where a company does something nice. I use Nike as an example. They'll release one shoe, right? And they actually made like 500 of that shoe. And the internet is like wallpapered with stories about this shoe that Nike made. The problem is that Nike made 500 of those and then made 50 million other shoes that weren't sustainable at all. But you're not hearing about those. That's what Greenpeace calls ad bluster. And also often companies are spending more money on that advertising and marketing of that sustainable thing than they did on the actual sustainable thing that they did. Lastly, don't get caught up in that one green aspect of a business. I know I use the term green, but you know what I'm talking about here. Like, oh, we ship in recycled packaging or our tags are dissolvable, but like, what else? Who made the stuff? Who made the recyclable packaging? What's the deal with the clothes? Like, what are they made of? Like how much water is used? Ask these questions. Nothing is ever black and white. And greenwashing really trades on this idea that things can only be good or bad. And there's no middle ground. And that's where our questions come into play. After you've taken all those steps, you can say, congratulations, I'm officially a greenwashing detective. You can read labels and details on the brand website. Anytime you encounter something you don't understand, Google it, followed by greenwashing. It's so magical. You can background check brands. I know someone was asking, where can I find good brands to shop? It's really hard, right? I always say, go to the Fashion Revolution Transparency Index or check out EcoStylist, which is actually a place where many sustainable, ethical brands that have passed their inspection are included. You can shop from one place. It's really great. Just type in what you're looking for and all the stuff will come up. Good on You is another resource that does the same thing. I am linked to them later in the deck, but there are resources out there. They're going to cut through all that greenwashing for you. And you can tell when you go there, you can rest assured that anything you order is going to be made with the best intentions. Also, don't feel weird about asking brands for the details. I know that we've been trained that we need to be like nice and that asking a question is trolling. Asking a question is not trolling, even if it feels kind of naughty the first time you do it. It's a good thing to do. And it helps educate other people around you who don't even know you, like virtual people around you. Lastly, I just want to remind you, it gets really overwhelming. You probably want to go into your closet right now, grab everything and just, I don't know, launch it into space. But it's progress, not perfection. Or some people say, like, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. I adopt that for both myself and the things I do, and also the companies that I shop from. I actually appreciate brands that are making an honest effort to do the right thing, even if they're not there 100%, because it's really hard to get there 100%. And trust me, there's a big spectrum of like making a lot of progress and being terrible for the planet. Find the brands that fit in there for you. Okay, before we move on to the slide, do we have any questions? I know I just shared so much information.
We have several. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm just going to scroll back here a little. Let's start with this one. How are companies like Everlane or Parade able to release so many items very often, although they claim to be sustainable?
Ding, ding, ding. They're not sustainable. I would urge you to go read their brand ratings on Good on You, because they're not. Everlane has absolutely no transparency in their factories, even though like pretend to, and that's like their advertising message. I actually did an episode with Garrick, who's the founder of EcoStylist, a resource that I called out, and he wrote a whole sort of like expose about Everlane and how they make all these claims, but it's a lot of ad bluster and they're not sustainable or ethical at all. Parade, I suspect, is the same way because they are engaging in a lot of other greenwashy things like send back programs for their underwear and all this like recycled underwear that's actually made of plastic bottles. It's not good for the planet or your privates probably. So I stay away from Parade as well.
Okay, I'm going to jump back here. So this one, I'm very curious about your answer. What company, designer, or store surprises people the most when they find out that they are fast fashion?
Oh, it's always Anthropologie. The number of times I've seen someone comment, oh, well, I shop at Anthropologie, so I'm fine. I'm like, actually, Anthropologie is owned by Urban Outfitters, and so is Free People. And they make all their stuff in the same factories. At the beginning of the pandemic, Urban Outfitters, Anthropologie, and Free People canceled almost everything they had on order, even stuff that was already made, and they refused to pay the factories, which meant workers didn't get paid. And workers starved. Workers lost their homes. Workers got very sick. A lot of other companies did that as well, but they were pressured into paying up. Urban Outfitters, Anthropologie, and Free People stayed silent on it and never paid. That's a company that's actually, for me, the worst of all of them, yet it coasts by because it seems fancier, right?
We had a question of, can you also talk about the stores like the Dollar Tree?
Well, I would need about 100 hours. I will tell you, I did a Patreon exclusive episode about dollar stores. Those, unfortunately, I come from a lower income background. I'm totally from the trailer park, no shame at all. And I shopped in dollar stores more than Walmart. My mom thought Walmart was too expensive. And those companies are just as problematic as fast fashion, if not more so, because they are squeezing on price so much. They are also terrible for their retail employees, like underpaid, overworked. It's a terrible place to work. Go read the Glassdoor reviews for the Dollar Tree or Family Dollar or Dollar General, and it's appalling. So many people are suffering who work for those dollar stores in all levels.
Okay, looking at our time here, I'm going to put a pause on the questions so we can get through the
Okay.
rest of your slides, and then we'll answer what we can at the end.
Great. So now that you're all riled up and you're boycotting Anthropologie and the Dollar Tree, let's talk about what you can do, because it's easy to feel like, oh my God, the world is collapsing on me. And now I guess I'm going to be a nudist because all clothing is unethical. There are so many things that you can do. Like I said, you have so much power. And when so many people are working together to make these changes, they can have massive impact on the world. For one, be a proud outfit repeater. Dismantle the expectation that you have to wear a new outfit for every event and Instagram photo. You definitely don't need a new wardrobe for your whole vacation. And trust me, when you start engaging in these behaviors, people around you will see it and they'll do the same, because we tend to overconsume clothing because we see it happening around us. It's normalized. If you have a favorite brand that isn't thinking of the planet and its people, if you love the Dollar Tree and you want to stay shopping there, demand from them that they do better. Go on social media, email, send them some old-fashioned snail mail, go pick it outside. You have so much power as a customer. Seriously, don't let up and change will happen. Vote with your wallet is another one. Support businesses and brands that care about the planet and its people. Use tools like Eco Stylists are good on you to find them. There are so many great ones out there. Thoughtfully rehome your unwanted clothing rather than just dropping it off the Goodwill. Consider donating directly to a shelter or a local charity. Pass it on to a neighbor in your local Buy Nothing group, or consider hosting a clothing swap with your friends. What is that? One man's trash is another man's treasure. Maybe I reverse those. Anyway, share them with friends. Extend the life of your clothing via mending and careful laundering. I have committed a lot of clothing murder thanks to some bad washing, very bad washing practices. I read the tags now. I do a lot of hand washing. I hang a lot of things outside to dry. Have your shoes, bags, and clothing repaired and tailored by professionals. Nothing feels better than a pair of recobbled shoes. And follow those laundry instructions, even if they seem like a suggestion. Just they're real. Listen to them. I also just recommend to everybody adopt a secondhand first approach, meaning look for something secondhand before buying it brand new. People hear that and they think thrift stores, yard sales immediately, but actually we live in the golden era, not just of polyester, but of secondhand shopping, where it's just as easy as buying something from Amazon. You can shop Poshmark, which is great for brands, The Real Real, which is great for luxury, ThreadUp, amazing resource for kids' clothes and casual wear. Depop is a mix of vintage, handmade, and trendy secondhand. And then there's other platforms like Mercari, Etsy, eBay, Vinted. I buy all of my clothes secondhand, except for underwear and socks and a few other things that I just can't find secondhand. It saves me a lot of money too. I also would just recommend, if you have to wear something new for a special event, rent it. Also, I'm not going to read this whole slide to you, but basically, whenever you can, shop small and shop local, because that money goes back into the community in a way it never will if you go shopping at Anthropologie. Small businesses create more jobs than big businesses, and they have the ability to shift into better, more ethical practices. If Zara decided next week they were going to become truly sustainable and ethical, they would literally have to dismantle their whole business. It would take 10 years before they could sell you something. A small business can literally just make a change like that. The difference between turning a cruise ship around, that's big business, and turning a bicycle around, those are small businesses. So I always shop small. I love giving gifts from small stores, gift certificates to local businesses. This is how we redistribute wealth and make a massive influence with our own money. Most importantly, this is my last slide, continue to learn more and share your knowledge with others. Lead by example. Someone said that in performance review to me one time, like 10 years ago, and it stuck to me. Brag about your sustainable changes and decisions. Be loud about it on social media and with the people in your life, because we've been influenced into a lot of bad behaviors. We can influence our ways out of it. I listed some additional resources here. Once again, we're going to share this deck for all of you to peruse on your own and, reminisce about what a great time we had. And also, if you have more questions, you can reach out to me via email, amanda@clotheshorse.world. You can find me on Instagram @clotheshorsepodcast. My website is clotheshorsepodcast.com. If you want to hear that episode about the Dollar Tree and so much more, you can check it out at patreon.com/clotheshorsepodcast. That's all I have. Let's answer some questions.
Okay, great. So Amanda, are you okay to stick around for another few minutes?
Oh, for sure.
Okay. So it is 8 o'clock. Anybody who needs to jump out now, no shame if you need to go. We
Yeah, it's fine.
Your time is precious. And I think you answered some of these, like the question about shopping at Goodwill, thrift stores. Anytime you get something secondhand, it sounds like that's a decent choice. At least it's not going to a landfill.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always say shop secondhand first. And one of the pleasant side effects of shopping secondhand first is it kind of slows down the shopping process, which can be good because sometimes I'll see something that I really want that's brand new and I'll say, okay, you know what? I'm sure I'm not the only person who does this. I'm going to put it in the cart and I'm going to come back to it in a day and see if I still want it. And very frequently, I no longer want it after I thought about it. And shopping secondhand first has a similar effect in that sometimes or often you're not going to find the exact thing immediately, although sometimes on Poshmark it gets really dangerous because often I can type in a brand, a size, a color, and get exactly what I was looking for. But in general, it takes a little bit more time, which allows you, whether you realize it or not, to reflect on really whether you want that.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so what about brands like 4 Days that say people can send clothes back? They're very popular with some influencers. So is this things like H&M did where you got a discount if you brought in your own clothes?
Yeah, so I actually, if I were going to make a list of brands that I currently really profoundly dislike, 4 Days would be definitely on there, along with Parade and Everlane. Here's the most depressing thing I've learned in my career. A few years ago, I was working for a client in the Pacific Northwest that fully makes everything out of upcycled materials. They're called Looped Works, and they make a lot of bags and things like that. All of it from reused, for example, they bought an entire fleet of old Delta uniforms and turned them into bags and other items. So fully upcycled stuff. And they hired me to create a closed loop, meaning fiber to fiber clothing line for them. Fiber to fiber, meaning we took one garment, we turned it back into fiber, and now it's being turned into another garment with no additional fibers added in. I was like, great, I know clothing recycling is like a big thing, right? So this will be easy, except guess what? Fiber to fiber really doesn't exist. Why? Well, for one, it's all that polyester that's in everything. All these blends make it really hard to break down the fibers into something else. And it's that because polyester holds color so well, it's hard to turn it into another color. We got some swatches of some fabric that someone was working on. It was really expensive and everything was this weird orangey brown with green flecks in it. And I said, okay, but we can get this in other colors than this really undesirable orangey brown with green flecks, right? And they were like, no, that's all it is right now. We can't get it to color. So what I'm saying is, we have this vision. I know I did for a long time too, where all the clothes, like a dump truck full of clothes would show up at the factory and it would just dump them in one end and all kinds of stuff would happen. Steam would come out through the roof. And then at the end, a bolt of fabric would pop out, right? That doesn't exist. And so companies who are taking back your clothing are not turning them into other clothing. There are exceptions. I know that Eileen Fisher tries to repair things and resell them, and I really believe in what they're doing. But someone like Parade or 4 Days, they're not chopping up the clothes and then turning them into new clothes. What they're doing is they're selling them off to textile recyclers who don't actually recycle the clothing into more clothing. Often it'll either go to the landfill, it'll be shredded up and turned into like insulation. It's called downcycling. A lot of things that are like the stuffing for like even the chair I'm sitting in right now, or cars or other upholstered items, are actually made of chopped, like shredded up clothing. It may also just be cut into rags for industrial use. That's another common use. Or if it does seem to have some wear in it, it will be shipped overseas to be sold in a secondhand market. And I didn't talk about that a ton in this presentation, but I would really urge you to check out the Or Foundation. They're on Instagram at the Or is present. They're going to show you what happens to all those clothes that get shipped overseas, and it's not a good story. So I see these clothing take back programs as just more greenwashing, a marketing story that gets you to spend more money.
Okay, next question. What is a buy nothing group and how do you find them?
That's a great question. Go to buynothing.org to find your local Buy Nothing group. Basically what it is, it's just a bunch of people in your neighborhood. It's always neighborhood focused. So it'll just be people who live near you. And you can post like, hey, I have this shirt. Does anyone want it? And people will ask like, can I have it? Can I have it? You get to choose who gets it. The end. I recently did it with a bunch of moving boxes. I was like, every time we move, we store these moving boxes because we think we're going to use them again. A year later, somehow they're like all gross from humidity, and then we throw them out in the recycling. This time, I'm going to give these boxes away. We had easily 200 boxes because we have a lot of stuff we had to move. And through our local Buy Nothing group, I got rid of all the boxes. None of them went in the recycling bin. So Buy Nothing groups can be great for clothing, appliances, boxes. Sometimes people will be like, I have the 6-pack of beer. I drank one and didn't like it. Who wants it? I mean, you name it, your neighbors want it. So once again, that's buynothing.org. You can find your local group.
That sounds like a great idea. Okay, what about high fashion designers? And I think this one was in reference to the fast fashion conversation, such as Chanel, Saint Laurent, Balenciaga, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to this idea of like, we think that fast fashion has to be cheap. And while these brands better be using better fabrics, a lot of them are still using polyester. Actually, I don't know if you remember a couple years ago, but Melania Trump wore this like day glow green dress for, I think it was the inaugural ball or something like that. And I looked it up because I was like, wow, that is like really bright. And even though it was like a $20,000 dress, it was 100% polyester. And what we've seen happen in regular fashion has also happened, this fast fashionification of luxury fashion as well, where they used to do 2 big seasons per year. It'd be like fall, winter, and spring, summer, and then maybe like resort. And then suddenly it was like, now we have to do pre-fall and pre-spring and all these other collections. And suddenly we're dropping new collections every month or two. You see this so much with luxury handbags, where it's like constantly like, how can we sell more bags more often to people? They're gifting them to influencers to get people to hoard bags, basically. And on top of that, a lot of these factories aren't much better. They've moved a lot of the manufacturing to countries where there aren't as many legal protections for workers, but they might do the final finishing of production, like the last few stitches, sewing the labels in Italy or France, for example, so they can put that made in Italy sticker in there, or label, I guess, but it's actually being made in not great factories. And the quality isn't as great as it used to be either. So these are things I would definitely urge you, if you're going to go drop that kind of money on really nice clothing, please do your research. And just like if you were going to go buy a car, right? Like, you want to know that you're getting something good that really is what it says it is. And I will tell you, when it comes to being secondhand first, if you're into luxury, you are in luck, because there is so much of it, thanks to the overproduction of the high fashion luxury industries. There's so much of it available secondhand, and that market is like thriving. You can definitely find anything you're looking for.
This next one, I think we're going to answer later in an email, which is asking for book recommendations. So Amanda, you and I can work on a short list of
Great.
those that I can send
Yeah.
up. Do you ever think there will be any legislation in support of accelerating some of these changes?
That's a great question. So in New York right now, they are actually working on some laws there. That's just the beginning, right? I look at a country like France, which actually has passed some pretty strict laws about EPR, which is extended producer responsibility. When we buy stuff right now from like if you bought something from H&M right now, right? H&M is responsible for that item until they sell it to you, and then it becomes your responsibility, right? So when you're done with it, you're the one who has to deal with the burden of it, whether it's donating it, disposing it, whatever. France has passed laws that say, no, the company who sold it to you has to be responsible for the end of that product's life. So they have to dispose of it, recycle it, whatever needs to happen. And the expectation there is that if retailers want to continue to sell stuff to customers in France, then they need to produce things that they can easily recycle, repurpose, repair, perhaps have greater longevity so people won't be cycling through these clothes as fast, so that then the companies aren't responsible for disposing of so much stuff. And as part of that, they've also limited the variety of blends that can be used, because if we can reduce the amount of different blends that are out there, like instead of there being 1,000, if there were just 10, it's a lot easier to try to figure out how we could eventually recycle fiber to fiber. So it's sort of like setting the stage for actual textile recycling. But we need that kind of law legislation in every country on the planet. And it's going to take some time, but it's not going to happen if we're not asking for it. There's so many fish to fry out there, and it's always like, oh, it's just fashion. But I hope that after hearing me talk about all this, you realize like, whoa, it's fashion. It's a big deal, and we got to do better.
Absolutely. We did have a question about local stores to recommend, which I will take care of. I have a list of secondhand shops in the area, and Amanda, I might cross-reference some of our brand stores around here. We've got a decent amount.
Okay.
So I'll ask you about those. So we'll send that out as part of, I think this is going to be a pretty big post.
I know, it's going to be like a book.
No, this is great. This will play in very well with all of the other programs we're having about Unraveled. These are the questions we need to be asking.
Absolutely.
Okay, it looks like that might be the end of our questions for you. Several shout outs, thanking you for being here. And we are so grateful that you could be here tonight, Amanda. This was quite a blast for us. And we'll be sure to get that YouTube video to everybody.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks to all of you who came. This is the first time I've done something like this, and I was really nervous. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Well, it went great. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We are going to call it a night, and I will be reaching out. Wait a couple days for that email because we'll hold off until the recording's ready to go to you as well. So everybody should hear from me around Thursday or Friday. All right. Thank you again, Amanda. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
So Amanda, we found you through your podcast. One of our coworkers here listens to it, and she recommended you when we were talking about trying to find somebody to speak on sustainable fashion. And it's not something that I've ever come across a presenter doing. So I have never tried to do a podcast. I know some people who have. How long have you been doing a podcast for?
It's kind of wild to think about it, but almost 2 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, I started at the beginning of the pandemic, and we're 2 years into the pandemic. So yeah, there we go.
Yes, that's quite the journey.
But it definitely is. It definitely is.
Wow.
I've always loved podcasts. I'm a huge NPR fan. I really just like listening to people talking while I can learn things from listening to them. And I thought maybe starting a podcast was really easy. It turns out it's not. It's a lot of work. It's really complicated. There's a lot of technical stuff. And I'm really lucky. My husband is actually an audio engineer. So
Maybe.
he set me up from a sound perspective in a way. I think that Clotheshorse actually sounds really high budget, and it's not at all because I have free audio access here at my house.
It's always convenient to know somebody with an in.
Yeah, definitely.
So before you started podcasting, what were you doing?
Oh, sure. I had actually worked as a buyer in the fast fashion industry, specifically the fast fashion industry, for about 15 years. And I worked for a variety of really iconic retailers. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I helped launch a new rental brand. And it turns out that that's right before a pandemic is a really bad time to do that, because as soon as the pandemic began and everybody was staying at home, nobody wanted to rent clothes anymore. I was laid off almost immediately. And I had a lot of time on my hands. And first, I played The Sims pretty obsessively for about a month. And then I got really bored with that. And I started going down all these Reddit rabbit holes. And I began to realize that most people don't know what happens behind the scenes to get their clothing made for them, to come to the stores, to take home and wear themselves. And it's all very shrouded in mystery. And if you work in that industry, it's all like very commonplace, common knowledge to you. But as an outsider, you don't know that. And I wondered, if people knew the truth, would they still love shopping so much? And I decided to start a podcast where I talked about it. And I wasn't really sure if anyone would like it. I didn't know how long it would last. Honestly, I didn't, like I said, know what it meant to do a podcast. I thought I would like write some stuff and record it, and that would be it. But it turned out to be this whole undertaking. And so in a weird way, the pandemic was really good for me, kind of coming to understand myself and what's important to me.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Yeah,
I found a new passion during it.
absolutely. That I didn't see coming at all. I never would have thought I would have a podcast. My husband and I talk about that all the time. Did we ever think that we would spend so much time saying the word podcast in this household?